In a world overflowing with distractions, we seek meaning. How do we transform ambition into something deeper, into true fulfillment? I'm Sam Pepin, CEO of Centrica, and I've spent years helping businesses succeed by connecting their goals to something bigger. On the Meaningful podcast, we explore not just how to win in business, but how to grow as individuals. Through conversation with thought leaders, innovators, and everyday heroes, we uncover the stories that drive us towards something greater. Whether you're striving for success, seeking purpose, or just looking for the next steps in your journey, this podcast is your guide to navigating the intersection of ambition, growth, and meaning. So please join me and our incredible guests as we redefine what's possible in both business and life. Enjoy. Tomorrow's documents won't be read, they will be explored. Welcome to the Meaningful Podcasts. I'm the host, Sam Pepin. Today we explore the future of AI native content, the psychology of engagement through design, and how interactivity is reshaping the way ideas spreads. Alex Shevelenko is the founder and CEO of RELAYTO AI, the first AI experience platform turning static documents into living, interactive stories. A Stanford MBA and former leader at Salesforce and SuccessFactors, Alex has pioneered the field of idea science, the art and science of transforming information into emotional-driven experience. Through his show, Experience-Focused Leaders, he shares insights from executives at DocuSign, CrowdStrike, and Alteryx, exploring how design, storytelling, and technology converge to make ideas truly unforgettable. His idea is simple yet profound: to help important ideas get their fair chance in the marketplace of attention. If you enjoyed this discussion, please let the world know with a like, a small review, or even a quick share. It supports how more people find meaningful content just like this. Let's begin. Mr. Alex Shevelenko, welcome on the Meaningful Podcast. How are you doing?
Doing great. Excited to be here, Sam.
Excited for you to be here also. I think this is going to be a very interesting and cutting edge conversation, actually. But to kick us off, tell us more about RELAYTO AI.
So RELAYTO AI is the first regulated content platform. What we mean by that is there's all this innovation in making content sexy and AI generated with generative AI tools. And it typically is the stuff we use as consumers and messages that we get out to consumers. But when it comes to content that the companies run on, like their annual reports, ESG reports, communications that go to every employee in the organization, high stakes, regulated industries, marketing and sales material. In these situations, you need to have a different approach to AI, and that is what we're focusing on RELAYTO. So we take content historically that's stuck because of the regulatory nature in old formats like PDFs and PowerPoints, things that are not necessarily seen as the latest and greatest in consumer experience, and turn them into interactive experiences as sites, as Netflix-style content hubs, so that important ideas get their fair chance in the marketplace of ideas. And we work with enterprises and organizations focused on regulated customers.
Beautiful. Very interesting. Obviously, this world is evolving so quickly. It's amazing to follow it. I want to bring you back, perhaps, the very beginning of this tech journey for you, because God knows it's been a very exciting one, perhaps. For you, staying perhaps quite general first and foremost, where did you remember your first time being so interested and invested in technology? Was that something that was always part of your character? Did you learn that perhaps in school? Tell me more about where does that interest emerge of?
Well, if we really want to go back, I was born in Soviet Ukraine in a city called Kiev, which is quite known now. And that in the USSR, you really, you had technology, technocratic country, effectively trying to implement technology top down. But I think the country itself felt very closed. And so I remember reading science fiction by a French guy named Jules Verne, who you probably have run across, and really loving the ability to escape this closed a closed mindset, and also, his fiction was like travel to the center of the earth, to the moon. Like this was like adventures, entrepreneurial. I ended up marrying a French girl later, so maybe that had something to do with it. So I think it was like that was the very beginning, and then the second uh, kind of moment is basically when we did come over to the United States. We settled in the area called Bellevue, Washington, which is a few kilometers away from the headquarters of Microsoft in Redmond.
Okay.
And my first internship was at Microsoft. I was surrounded by there. They were the cool tech company of the day, right? They were the open AI of the day,
Correct.
and so it was definitely also um, exciting, and I managed to work there, and so it was sort of not seen as a force of negativity. It was actually unlocking, right? Like even if we joke about PowerPoints now, but back in the days like that, the desktop productivity revolution was fundamentally spearheaded by Microsoft, and they were doing a lot of great things back then. So it kind of created unlock human creativity was what we could argue was the first no code tool was like Excel, and the
Sure.
first no code design was PowerPoint, for many people. So that was exciting to be part of that journey.
Very nice. Really, with what you're currently working on right now, it's sort of this concept of from static to alive. We're seeing more and more of these software now that you can prompt, and there's a video that emerge out of it, and so on. So there's really this concept nowadays of AI experience. And you,
Yeah.
you talk about this at great length, and obviously you're at the forefront of it on the
Hmm.
content sides. Really, I'm really interested in some of your insights on that. Really, when you're thinking about taking a flat deck or a PDF, like you said,
Yeah.
into an interactive, measurable, experiential, perhaps
Yeah.
that can really, I suppose, earn the attention and action that is necessary from whatever teams it's being dispersed into. There's something exceptionally powerful about that. There's something in which it reminds me of Steve Jobs a lot, by the way, right? Steve Jobs
Hmm.
talks about this concept that design is not just what it looks like, it's how it works, basically.
Yeah.
There's a functionality to design that is, I think, exceptionally underrated by the masses. From your perspective, though, what single transformation, think about the layout, the interactability, or even the padding, perhaps, most reliably 10x engagements on a formally static deck? What's the main thing in which makes it so much better in an experiential way?
I think it depends deeply on the purpose of the content. So you really need to take a step back and say, is the idea here that we're going to really engage somebody and create an emotional experience? Uh, is the idea here that we want to remove friction and build trust at the same time and drive towards some kind of a transaction? And I think they're different. And so I think
Okay.
I would say, like, let's, like, when you look at the particularly regulated content, I think you really need to first start with the end user, and what are you trying to help them accomplish? Because the person who is interested in learning and educating themselves and digging in deeper and self-guided journey is quite different than the person who is like, all right, I want to know there's a lot of work done, I want to know it's organized, and I want to know that I can quickly check what I need to check, but I don't want to go super deep and have an immersive experience. And so I think the magic is sometimes you could bring the two in one experience. Sometimes you have we talked about Netflix, right? Like if you have a Netflix experience for movies, right? Like it's not you expect one movie is for everything. You don't
Right.
you're in the mood for romantic comedy, some because you speak French. You can do that, or you're in the mood for action movie excitement, right? Like, or you mood for like a rags to riches story that's going to inspire you to conquer something, right? So that those are you come into the experience with different expectations, and so I think for some reason we just show up to people with like single document or like a folder and just expect that everything in there is the same. No, you need to
Correct.
tell people, hey, this is a summary. This is like, and if you're in a short form video mode, this is like some short form video experiences. This is the deep dive. And depending on who you are, what you're looking for, your areas of interest, we can guide you to the relevant experience. So I think that is fundamentally um, the first question. And then back to uh, what are the levers? So the simplest lever that we found that works particularly in the long form content, say anything above 10 pages,
Okay.
is so obvious that you would be shocked as to why people don't do it. And it's a navigation that is persistent and feels a lot like the web. So if you think of the way documents are designed, they're either like a blurb, just a blurb of page after page after page, or sometimes you get like heading chapters if you're particularly good. So it's kind of divided by chapters. Sometimes you get a table of contents up front, but you generally tend to get lost inside
Yeah.
all of these things. And if you get there, but most of the time you don't even get there because all you see is a wall of like 84-page PDF, and you're on your phone, and good luck and kind of trying to get there, right? So building out the nonlinear navigation that combines a linear storytelling with nonlinear, that feels like the web, that adjusts to the format of the document. Could be on the right, could be on the left, could be a menu button if you're on your mobile, but it immediately gets you to the experiences that you're looking for, is obvious. But like the only place I've seen this done in standard documents is they sometimes hard coded into like very well done annual and ESG reports. Like it's
Right.
typically only in European countries they do those, and that's the only place where I've seen that hard coded. But it's hard coded, and back to Steve Jobs, it's like when he was making fun of people of hard coding the interface on the phone, that it's like the bottom 40% of like BlackBerry is like this clungy thing. So it's kind of they're hard coding this thing on the page, which has limited real estate. And that's the only thing that gives navigation. So if you could bring web-based or iPhone-like smart navigation that helps you get to your destination, you have built trust. You have people not get lost. You help people get the critical information they're looking for. And sometimes in that navigation, you could add the one thing they need to do at the end of that document, which is so obvious. And, anybody in marketing kind of realizes that this is like call to action
Yes.
is where it's at. But tell me the number of PowerPoint presentations where they had a call to action. It was typically like if they have it, it's somewhere on the thank you page in the very end, right?
Yeah.
And it's like something you have to go and start writing down some email or like something not even clickable, like half the time, right? You have some exceptions, but as a rule, the single most important thing that you need to do, for people to do with your content, is not anywhere obvious in most of these presentations. So one of the wins is to create by default, always persistent call to action. Just like you have always persistent navigation, you would have always persistent call to action. So this is one.
Beautiful.
This is one of the quick wins that we have recommend for our clients. I would say the second one, to take back to your point, is that the more you could create a visual and immersive experience in important content, the better. So the most obvious thing is, okay, great, bring some images in, that reinforce this, but that's not going to move the needle because anybody can do some images. So what moves the needle is that you land into, like, say, an annual report, but it starts with a video movement, and you're like, oh, there's video there. This is dynamic. This is it. There's
Different.
So it's different, right? Like I'm immediately, and if the video is done well, it's on brand. It creates some emotional reaction, and we as human beings, our brains are wired first to pay attention to whatever is moving, and second, we retain certain information that much better after there's some emotion that we're feeling. So video is a way to front load emotion into the experience. So emotion could be about trusting, about helping people, whatever is the mission of that organization or of the purpose of that content. And then separately, the more video and interactivity you could add inside the experience, the better. And so what that means is, imagine on page 3, you have a video of a CEO delivering a short message on the report, or like a seller of this of the experience. And so that has a huge difference, because the people that want to hear from somebody, or that are like want a little break from lots of text, they just have that interactive experience. And so that could be videos, any forms of embeds, but basically something that's on a page that allows you to interact with it and interrupts your pattern of like
Yes.
passive consumption, right? So passive is maybe great if you're reading a fictional book that, you know, of your favorite author and you're like into reading, that works. But for where we work in the nonfiction world, you have to work very hard to earn the attention so that people like stand there. And so I think creating these you know, tastable moments of interaction, whether they're video or interactive apps inside the experience, makes a big difference. So those are the two big ideas: navigation and immersive interaction. And what very important, immersive, because if you just add a YouTube link to a PDF document and you click on that YouTube link, what's going to happen?
Well, what's gonna happen is gonna open a new window with that YouTube basically video, and you might even forget to come back to the doc because now you're doing something else, right?
Exactly. You're get distracted. You might see an ad if you didn't pay for, so you might, and then you're like, you have to go find whatever you were looking at this document, and then you might be like listening to some political, you know, angry person telling something that has nothing to do with the brand of the person that shared or the message of the person that shared the original video. So you have a lot of risk in that traditional format, and yet that's kind of the default that most important messages get to, is like, they, you know, at best they take you out of their important experience somewhere else if they're trying to make it more engaging, which is really a tragedy wrapped inside a tragedy.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously we know this for a fact from a biological and from a neuroscientific perspective. The more your senses are engaged, the more obviously the better it is for your memory, better it is also for just how you feel through it, right? Let's be very honest. When is the last time that the average person said, yes, I have a 62-page document I need to go through in text, and some of it is in bold, just to tell you, oh, this is important. All right, this is in bold. But really, there's something interesting about doing things that just feels good, right? That's just, first of all, you want to do more of it, but second of all, it increase the effectiveness of it. One thing that I'm super interested in, though, Alex, is really RELAYTO's ecosystem, because that's really where I think the magic happens with these AI tools. Is not just from a functionality perspective, but the ecosystem that surrounds it is exceptionally important, and I believe perhaps might be even the mid to long term. So you had this great quote, which is, operating inside great clouds taught me the difference between feature and flywheels, which I really liked, coming directly from you there. But obviously, you had a lot of experience with cloud DNA, obviously SuccessFactors, Salesforce, just to name a few. Now you're a founder. I suppose from your perspective, which GTM or platform principles from those years perhaps most shape how you build your current platform?
I think when it's very easy to get confused and think you're very important when you're an entrepreneur, right? Because this thing is really important to you, right? You're like, you love your product, and I think you know, we tend to forget that the distribution of the platform is just as important as the product that you're building. And so if you ask serial entrepreneurs what's more important, the product or the distribution, they might actually say it's the distribution, right? Like, you figure out the distribution and like superpower of some kind, and then you know, tune the product to that. And I think it's easy to make that statement, and you know, it's harder to actually combine the journey. Like, I'm sure I've made plenty of mistakes in doing this, but one of the designing principles for us was that we wanted to think, well, what are the most universally distributed web experiences that we know and that are modern? And so, like, a very simple one is YouTube, obviously, like YouTube You know, it's in websites, it's standalone, it's sort of everywhere. And um, when you think of, documents, they still haven't figured out how to be kind of embeddable on a consistent basis. And if they are embeddable on a consistent basis, they are like almost like design differentiating themselves by the genre of the document. Like if you're on YouTube, you don't care, is this like a YouTube about cats, or is this like a news YouTube, or is this a kind of your personal thing, or it's a company thing? It's sort of a single platform that supports lots of content. But with
Okay.
documents, some people would do, oh, am only embedding slides. And some people would do, I can only help you because I'm a slide builder, or I'm only doing flip books, and flip books were these old school things that make a flipping noise online,
Yeah.
like built with Flash, kind of just disgustingly old technology. But it created at least a way to distribute something. But all they could do, like a hammer, was just make something flip, and you don't want anything to flip necessarily. And so we saw this, um, very obvious opportunity to just make content that's easy to distribute, whether it's externally, internally, um, whether you need to distribute it securely, whether it needs to be integrated into WordPress or inside your HR portal. We can make that work. And so I think that was really important decision. It needed to play when we first had our first initial thought was, because we knew tech marketing. We obviously thought like we'll find a lot of opportunities in tech marketing. So we needed to make sure that we play with tools that people in tech marketing use, like HubSpot or Marketo from Adobe, so that we could integrate their data and so they could become distribution vehicles. So I think there's a lot of thought in especially getting our early customers and making sure that they understand that this is not going to be a friction for them. So I would say that's the key, is that not only does it not present friction, but in some cases you find your your PayPal inside eBay moment, right? Which is where you have a group of people within an existing ecosystem that loves what you're doing. And so the more entrepreneurs can find that, the better.
Interesting that you make that segue. Really, to me, perhaps when it comes down to your journey, it's very, very interesting. You've been repeatedly, obviously successful, operating basically inside of these clouds, and now deciding to go all the way to being a founder. Tell me about the founding moments. I suppose really what's by me navigating what's Relato is. One question came to mind right away, which is, why Relato? Why this perhaps and everything else that you could have done? And why now perhaps from a marketplace perspective? I think there's great wisdom and insight to gather from that. And really, I would love if you could take us back to that time, if you remember. So I'm sure you do because you're a founder, and we typically do. Is if you had, what was the first sort of aha moment, customer moment, or whatever moment perhaps that basically put you on that path of, what I want to do with my life, but not only what I want to do with my life, what the marketplace needs right now is a tool such as Relato. Do you remember that first moment?
Yeah. Well, look, let me take a step back. So this is obviously not the first startup that I founded. I got lucky uh, before business school to help fund another company. It had an exit. It was quick and very lucky. And so what I realized, first of all, was that I was lucky. And so one of the reasons I worked at Salesforce and Success Factors is like, look, it kind of just happened. I still have a lot to learn because it kind of exposed me to all the things that I didn't know on how to build a scalable company. And so,
Sure.
fortunately, when I joined Success Factors, which was a really long run, I had a chance to wear many hats. I wore a marketing hat, a sales hat, launching new businesses within the company hat, and this kind of the theme of what is now Relato kind of ran across that, because we were trying to say, hey, we're better employee experience, we're innovative, we're SaaS, we're this. Here's a PDF, read all about it, right? Like it was kind of like something felt off because what we were selling as a product was not in line with how we were communicating it. And
Mm.
that was really interesting because when I was at Microsoft, so I mentioned like I like actually interned on the Office team, and I was tasked to look at this thing called the PDF, and try to make sure that it doesn't replace Microsoft in the last mile. When you shove all your PowerPoints with clippies and animations, you shove it into this flat PDF. Like we were worried about that at Microsoft, and obviously we didn't figure anything out, right? So it was like PDF became the de facto standard for where kind of the formal documents end up. And so you could now see the thread from my very first internship through my career in consulting and in B2B tech. You could just see everything is changing, but PDF somehow could have got embedded as this last mile, and it's not. It's locked in, and that's the power of standards. And so when I was fortunate enough to have had exit from SuccessFactors, one of the things that I was asking is like, well, what is it that I could focus on that would help really important ideas come to life? Because that was just something that's really interesting for me, and this notion of a PDF as the last mile was one. And so we started working with agencies at first, like as an agency, working with Omnicom Group, Salesforce, Accenture, and helping them take their PowerPoints, which they all knew how to do, and turn them into interactive sites quickly, right? Because obviously they could pay, 20, 50, 100K to build websites. But like if you need to move quickly and be agile, you kind of need to be able to transform something in minutes, not hours. And so we built an agency to do that for high stakes communications. And that led to what is now RELAYTO as an AI first product. And so it was not oh my God, I had like an immediate inspiration. I think it was just a pattern match of everything that you see, like, hey, the PDF 20 years ago, same as it is. Website 20 years ago, not same as it is. Lots of valuable and expensive things go into creating PDF. Lots of very expensive people's times goes into consuming that or not consuming. And so what if we could, reduce the friction for creators in creating something compelling and make the consumption experience modern? And so to connect the last dots, why the shift is possible? Well, everybody said, kill this PowerPoint, kill Excel, kill PDF, kill the whatever, kill the web, kill, like a lot of murderers going on in the valley. And and our view was, well, look at what happened, right? Like you don't need to kill something. You could just take something that's already a de facto standard and transform it for the modern consumption experience. And so just like back in the days, PDF was creating control, was making sure stuff gets printed out properly, now, but it doesn't work for screen anymore. Now we could say, hey, how can we make it work better on the screen for navigation? How can we make it more immersive and media rich versus an analog piece of paper? So we found a way to take an old standard and adapt it to the new requirements versus try to murder it. And so that was sort of the insight that led to the platform.
Very, very Pacific of you, perhaps. Yeah. The really, I think, fortune favors a bold. I think you call it luck. I think you're just a bold sort of guy. But anyways, really something that I want to wrestle with you on is the idea science. You have this method that really codify perhaps how to package complex idea into guided journey, which is exceptional. Which made me think a lot of Albert Einstein, actually, which is, if you don't understand, if you can explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough. So really there's a synthesis aspect, and there's a value in quality to directiveness that I think you really understand. Perhaps walk us through the idea science checklist that you use before pressing, I suppose, the publish button, and what must be true perhaps for an idea to become an experience.
Yeah, well, I think let's kind of set the backstory for what it is, so that people could invent it for themselves, right? Like it's less about relate to. So when I was at Stanford Business School, I was very fortunate to take a class from Chip Heath, who's since written a book called Ideas That Stick, or Make
Okay.
Ideas Stick. I forgot the exact title. Chip, sorry. But the class was the precursor to the book. And the genesis behind it was, if you could use behavioral science uh, to to change how information is presented, you could accomplish results in a very cost-effective ways that have your, your stated goals are for your communication. And it was uh, it, it was a lot of it was like, how do you craft a brand new message, right? Obviously, like, how do you use storytelling, how do you kind of engage emotion, so the usual stuff you could expect. Some of it was borrowing ideas from Cialdini on kind of how to make certain things likable, so building social proof. But fundamentally, that gave me an idea that if you start taking behavioral science and then some things from neuroscience, remember we talked earlier about movement,
Yes.
um, and you string that all together, you could actually have a very cohesive database of levers that together could help your message get through. And remember, we also talked at the beginning, like, it depends a little bit what your message needs to do, right? Does it need to educate, or does it
The
need
intent behind
to,
it.
or does it need to like transact, right? And so that was that. So the research that we did is I brought on board a PhD student who in psychology. We just literally, it's like like, we had this mega spreadsheet where we organized everything by scientific disciplines, right? And so, because they weren't talking to each other, right? This was kind of another paradox of academia. So the
Yeah.
neuroscientists don't want to talk to social psychologists, to behavioral economists, etc. I've read a ton of this stuff myself, because I was just started geeking out on this. It's really kind of interesting. And so some of these, so let's just come back to some of these features. So navigation gives you a sense of control, right? So that's like, human beings want to feel autonomous, and they don't want to feel like, oh, I'm going to force you to, get to the point that you're interested in. It gives you a sense of immediate, like, empowerment. Or something like a video, like, increases emotional engagement. It gives
Yes.
you a break, and then you remember what happens after and before the video, at a higher pace. So that sort of, so these are so a lot of features that you just get by default and relate to are really, at first we were doing them manually, and then we were like, okay, this is working, let's automate it. So we took all the science, tested it in enough examples of users, and whether you're meeting your goals, again, whether it's engagement or conversion. And so some of the super powerful features that we have is, like, you could now just click a button and have a background video on your cover page. And you don't need to do anything, right? First you had to go find the video, cut it out so it's not too heavy and doesn't delay
Right.
loading the file, play around with the font coloring, so the AI doesn't mess up, like the AI wasn't able at the time to recognize that your title of the document is in black, and so it would start covering it up. And so, like, do all that adjustments so that a non-designer could basically, with one magic push, create a surprisingly beautiful video, and then one other magic push to create an animation. And then now, because you have an embed in, like, for example, we found, like, the obvious things, like, people are lazy, right? So remove friction for them, but engage them. So guess what? Like, at first we were like, push this button, we'll help you at a button, and then you could see a video. And then so that was the idea science point one, right? Because like, we didn't have all the data. And then we were like, okay, but not as many people are clicking the play video button as we would like. What can we do to still get them to be engaged, um, and kind of experience the product was experience the idea without clicking play. And we said, well, if you could start autoplaying the YouTube video, as you know, as long as it's kind of large enough, takes large enough space on the page, that would be great. So we built a manual feature that allows you to autoplay something. But then people are like, oh, I have to figure that out, how to make it, like tweak it to make it autoplay. So we then added finally, like if the video is above, takes more than half of the page, if you kind of embed, like create a thumbnail, add a link to it, and it's more than half a page on that thumbnail, the video will just start playing automatically. And so you don't have to do absolutely anything as a creator and as a consumer.
Right.
So I'd say the idea science is what we found is it's an iterative process to create a delightful experiences with increasingly less and less friction for the creator. That's sort of that's the magic. I think you can obviously, if you have an agency and lots of money and lots of time and lots of opportunities for iteration, you could create something magical. But unfortunately, with documents and regulated content, I think that is not always the opportunity. And so we are basically idea science is democratizing the engaging experience for creator and improving how those ideas get consumed for the audience.
Yeah, no, I love it. There's this concept, like I said, once I dig a little bit upon your journey and who you are, really stick to me, perhaps to use, to come back on that point from that beautiful professor. Really, you said when a deck becomes a journey, the buyer becomes a participant. And that's really what is created here. It's active participation. It's interactivity, perhaps, that makes it, again, immersive, but that makes it, again, whatever the target outcome is, that outcome is more likely if people are fully engaged towards it. That's really the bottom line. Now, experience are also seen by yourself, which I think seen by everybody, perhaps in this industry, as revenue system, not a file, perhaps, which is very interesting. Think about proposal, one-pagers, playbooks, case studies, right? When you reimaginate them as navigable app, if you will, with stories path and embeds, and I suppose analytics that we're going to talk about in a second also, that is directly tied to pipeline, that is exceptional. And I think that is really something that, again, it speaks for itself when it comes down to the features, but it also speaks for itself when it comes down to the conclusive ROI that is embedded within the system. Now, from your perspective and all the data that you have, which content type produce the fastest sales impact once they are converted into interactive experience? Is there one that just completely separate themselves, or it's pretty much across the boards an increase in outcomes?
Yeah. So great observation. Actually, one of our customers describes us as document revenue engine, which I love because it sort of, look, we do more than documents, obviously, but document is a broad enough word. Revenue is core because I think it's underneath the kind of intent ultimately to create value for the end customer. And then the engine is that it allows you to do it at scale. And so you're right that this is a systemic approach. Because if you're reducing friction, then it can be systemic. Whereas if it's an artisanal thing that you can do once in a blue moon, then, it could have impact, but it's certainly not a scale, that works for B2B. But to get back to you in terms of where we see the single biggest lift, I think I would say it's two types. One is a document or an experience that a lot of people see.
Okay. So quantity.
So it's again, if you have a really important communication that goes out to all of your investors, all of your employee, all of your partners, it's like it's really critical that they understand and engage with it somehow. Look, and if it's one asset, that is good investment to figure out how to make it work. And so for me, it's particularly like silly almost that people, like, some of their most important communications that go to relatively broad audience are really horrible, right? And it goes like from company wide, corporate wide to even functional. Like for in the US, people like right now around this time of the year, we're recording this in September, people are starting to do open enrollment into employee benefits. This is like 25% of the personnel cost for the companies goes into benefits. Nobody understands these benefits, not the HR people that rolling them out. Even the brokers and advisors like can't understand it all because there's a lot. Certainly employees and their partners and spouses that are trying to figure this out are struggling. And part of the culprit is that the way it's delivered is, some PDF benefit guides that's like 60 pages and is, non-navigatable, you know, completely separate from explainer videos or anything else that you would want to do there. So this is a communication that goes to every employee. It's mission critical for HR because they don't get fired. So it is important. It's
pretty
kind
good.
of the CEO and CEO's partner are looking at it, right? Like, it's mission critical for this benefit advisors because this is at the end of this is the main one of the main deliverables that they provide that's highly visible for their work. It's critical for insurance companies that are selling health insurance because if people don't understand, they're not going to enroll, and so they lose revenue. So it's all around, important communication that literally drives revenue.
Mhm.
But it's done like, 90s are calling, and it's like, so, bring in some Soviet era designers in there and, see what happens. So this is something we're working on. So this is surprising, I would say, example of kind of, you don't think of employee communications as kind of driving revenue, but they are.
Oh, they certainly do.
In
Yeah.
this case, they really are. But the ones that I would say are the most obvious in the B2B context, which is maybe where you're asking, is proposals.
Yeah.
Because with the demand generation, like you could say, well, it was because of the content or the experience or our great campaign. Like it's harder to pinpoint as to what actually, brought in the customers. We could make a great point that the experience converts people from here's my email to like, hey, I booked a meeting because I read the content and I'm really engaged, and it fills into fills the pipeline with late stage deals. But like there's a lot of people that would be arguing that this is something, the sales rep is amazing or something. With the proposals, it's very easy. Like if you're doing at scale proposals, and some of our customers have done it, they've done some with RELAYTO and some, in traditional methods, and they had 2x the win rate. So to me, that was an eye opener.
Oh, wow.
That the process, because I think, and maybe there's a little of a bias, because if you're choosing to use RELAYTO, you probably care about the customer, right? Like so maybe but in general, wouldn't you want, like, if you're bothering enough to put together a proposal, shouldn't you care about the engagement with that? So I think that is sort of the gold standard. Sometimes companies get there a little bit later because you typically don't have marketing and design savvy teams associated with that. But I think eventually that's the hardest revenue that we've seen. And then you can imagine if you're sending an interactive proposal that's compelling and engaging, and then you're getting analytics on the back end, you're still building trust, right? You're not just saying, hey, I'm sending you this thing, but I'm going to I want to get your email so I can track you. It's like, that doesn't build trust, right? Like, and like, unfortunately in the startup world, there's, approaches like that. It's like, it's my super important proposal or my super important deck, and I'm going to track you. Like, yeah, maybe you're less important to most corporate buyers than you think you are. But if you're saying, I created a great experience for you, I care about you consuming that experience, and as part of that, yeah, I'm going to, make sure that it's safe and secure, and I track it so I can improve that experience for you. You're building trust, and then if you have a deal or you don't have a deal. If people are engaging you or bullshitting.
That's right. And that analytics is so important, right? It matters so much because
Yeah.
really and we use PandaDoc. I was our proposal software as we speak right now. But really, it's interesting because I was looking at what you guys are offering, and there's obviously time on section, which now is on most proposal software, but there's also heat maps, there's drop-off moments, there's all sorts of things that are instrumental perhaps to the content. And so really the marketing and sales coach themselves, I suppose, which is very, very important. I always come back to what Edward Deming is talking about, right? So in God
Mm.
We Trust, everything else must bring data. If
Yeah.
there's no data attached to it, like you said, it's hard to it's not possible to measure, and therefore it's not possible to improve upon it. Really, though, to me, there's two things on this. There's the true KPI, as I like to call them, and then there's some KPIs in which are just there to sort of consolidate with with the COO and the CTO team. Just say, oh, well, by the way, we tried this one thing that really has very little thing to do with the actual outcomes. For you, what is your short list of sort of true content KPIs, and how do teams perhaps act on them quickly and effectively and optimize them through your software?
For us, there's two main true north metrics. So one is the time to create a compelling content experience. So I think it used to, when we were an agency, it would take us a week to get something out, right? Because we'd be doing it manually. We'd create custom CSS experiences and whatnot, and then increasingly this can be done with AI in 30 seconds, right? So I think that is that is what we measure kind of our success, and I think the story is that obviously you could still, we serve a lot of customers in regulated industries, so you could have controls and more options. So it's not like one of those things that you give to AI and you just pray that everything works, right? Like you have to have execute control. But if you could create that interactive value in seconds with the least amount of touch, that is the fundamental driver of our success, because then you could have more content. If you have more content, you create Netflix hubs, you create more journeys, you get in a habit of creating, and it really unlocks the friction. So that's one. The second metric, and sometimes they go a little counter to each other, is the level of engagement. And I think we measure that both in terms of interactivity and overall time spent. So an average time spent on RELAYTO asset is like about 3x what an average entire visit would be on a B2B site. So
Oh, wow.
this is exciting measure for us. But sometimes the velocity of creation goes counter to the number of interaction points and engagement. So that's so we need to increasingly figure out how do we create least amount of friction with maximum amount of interaction and conversion events on the site. And so the solutions to that we've developed over time are like that video that plays automatically, right? Doesn't require anything, just kind of sees what's there, using AI to generate, things that were done manually. So the navigation, the call to actions, the branding, they're all generated at scale. The personalization could be now generated at scale. And so that's sort of, those are the two drivers, how many personalized journeys you could create and interaction moments, right? Ultimately they end up in time, but I think it's a higher, sometimes we're okay to be less time, but get the job done.
Right.
But I think the key to building a scalable business is to make this as easy as an API call or just kind of a simple upload of an asset.
Yeah, make it a no-brainer, right? As little friction as possible. I think you said that multiple times. Really, you come back to trust. All right, you said it 4 times, if I recall properly, during this podcast already. It's definitely huge for you, and we can see that in the way you talk. You strike me as a very pragmatic thinker also. So really, when you're thinking about trust by design, the governance piece, and really perhaps when you're thinking about the enterprise grade control, one thing that I talk about a lot about AI about is the guardrails, right? Which can be very, very much necessary, which is necessary now. It might be even more necessary, perhaps, as it increase effectiveness and power, perhaps. Really, when you're thinking about the guardrails, when it comes down to access, to versions, to approval, to brand consistency, which you talked a little bit about, there's this interesting balance with with skill, but skill in which perhaps doesn't break trust because of all sorts of kerfuffle that can be done,
Yeah.
even from a purely basically hosting and bandwidth perspective. So really, I think it was Lincoln Chaffee. Don't quote me on it though. That was talking about that trust is built with consistency, right?
Mm,
Built is actually what a brand is trust constantly. Perhaps
mm.
that's what represents, I suppose, what you're building. So really, I'm interesting from your perspective. What governance features with an S or even one, if you only can think of one, do enterprises perhaps underestimate until something goes wrong? I think something it's too late, and how can you prevent that through Relato?
You bet. So I think the number one thing in regulated verticals is that generative AI could be a great, like you could think of it as a great maybe enabler in the earlier stages of creation, right? Like let's say
Mm-hmm.
you get some approved, you brainstorm with it, it helps you put something together. But when it comes to the later stage, to cut like customer facing stuff, it's still not, not quite ready for prime time, in the majority of the use cases, and that's sort of the tricky part. So that's one of the reasons why we we are open to what our customers want to do on the creation side, right? If you want to generate your images, with Midjourney, and we could incorporate Midjourney into it, and you could have a optionality to choose and affect them. But in general, we don't want like an untrained, not brand certified team members, going wild with Gen AI in regulated verticals like health communications or insurance, right? Because it's not worth whatever cost savings you're going to get, if you're going to get them, are not going to be worth losing a license, right?
Right. That's
And
for sure.
so I think the gist of where we found their sweet spot and kind of a really unmet need is how do you provide the guardrails, where the core content is already approved, but you're using generative AI. We call it regenerative AI. Like that's our thing. But you're using elements
Okay.
where you can create improved experience from that approved content. So again, back to like very example we've ran through. So navigation, right? So we've we've de-risked navigation to the point where we use AI at times. We have like non-probabilistic solutions where they are more appropriate. So there's 6 different technologies that we use to generate the single best navigation that you could generate on the fly, and we'll continue improving it. And the beauty of it is it's not risky. Like you're not redesigning the total experience. It's still, page one is still page one. You're just helping
Right.
people get through to that, and that's beautiful because it uses Gen AI. We don't talk about it necessarily that much. But you're effectively using all this innovation on an approved content to make it more consumable, right? So that's a single document experience. And then you could obviously generate on the page level from that approved content, you could generate an audio avatar describing what's going on that page with kind of a little disclosure, but all it's talking about is that page. It only reads that page. It's not going, there's no room for
Interesting.
hallucination. So we're just taking, again, the approved content and adding layers of engagement around that. The second theme is like, remember I mentioned a Netflix style hub. So
Yeah.
this is interesting, right? Because then in the Netflix style hub, you could say, well, it's obviously a little bit more advanced. There's more content, so you could say, write a script like I want to generate my hub with other previous approved content. So if you have inside your system approved assets, right, not stuff for, this is for you employee centric like sales tools, right, which half the time ends up being outside, not what's not to be seen ends up being seen, or some legacy stuff that people are using, that's 5 years behind marketing standards, or whatever the latest product releases. But you can basically say, hey, I want to create this personalized experience from approved content. You give a script, and then all you're getting is an approved, a Netflix style engagement portal for your customer or your employees based on pre-approved content. So you're removing the risk of people making something that's they're making up on their own, or they're building from scratch, right? You're giving them an engaging, approved experience that allows personalization, like you pull it together, and then the customer on the end, the end customer has their own personalization, right? And because if you can navigate something in only the way that you're interested in, you're no longer stuck in a monologue of a document, right? You actually have a journey in which you participate. So
Right.
this is a non-intuitive thing, because we could say the personalization is like, if only I create the Chat GPT script that meets only my unique goals, et cetera, et cetera. Like, that's great, but to get that approved in a regulated industry is going to be a very, very delicate and difficult process. But to create a personalized journey is much easier, and it's a quicker win. And so you could start, instead of talking about, innovation that may or may not happen 3 years from now was like 15 approval cycles, you could actually start doing something right away. And I think that is one of the things that we see as a big opportunity in these regulated verticals, is you need to adapt to the way they speak, to their language, to their requirements, to their approval workflows, not to say, hey, throw all that out the window and trust us because, we started our AI startup 6 months ago and we're cool.
Yeah, got it. I want to talk a little bit about the Experience Focus Leaders podcast, right?
Okay.
Which is your show. Really, something that I love, adore actually, is Newton talk about this a lot, which is the reason why I was able to go this far is because I was able to perhaps be stay on the shoulder of giants, to quote him directly.
Mm-hmm.
You have your own show where you have leaders such as the people from DocuSign, from Alteryx, from CrowdStrike that I saw, from Eloqua perhaps. Really, those are some of the best in the whole world. And I really like this because you said category winners obsess over the how of the message, not just the message. So again, coming back to product against the distribution, or perhaps both being together, I would love if you can name the most counterintuitive content move that you learned from your guests that teams can adopt. Today's Friday, so team can adopt next Monday, perhaps as soon as possible.
So this is recency effect. Speaking of behavioral science, but I just spoke to it, so it's not even live yet. But you brought up the word category design. So first of all, you're right. We're very fortunate. We have CEOs and founders of these great companies that you mentioned on the podcast, Alteryx, and DocuSign, and Success Factors, and Eloqua, and so on. And a lot of them have designed their categories, right? Like these business. The reason we think of them is they design them. Well, one of the guys that designed the whole notion of category design was my guest, Christopher Lochhead, on the podcast just a few days ago. And I had a chance to work with Chris at Success Factors when he helped us reposition the company right around the IPO time. And one of the things that I think is really relevant for our audience today is that you should really think of yourself and your career together with an AI co-founder. So that I think that this is something that's new. I think even though we are using AI, and like for example, my team created Alex GPT that kind of takes whatever I've written and done and kind of like pulls it all together. But I would say I've never thought like one of our co-founders at RELAYTO is an AI. And so I think that this you could think of this for your company, for your project, and for your career. And I think the war in when we think of guys like Christopher Lockhead, he's really deliberate with words because languaging like is kind of determines how you think. And so when we say, oh, it's an AI bot or it's an AI assistant or it's a copilot, that's weak. That's kind of like that's these are not these are kind of derivative of something else. But
Sure.
when you say like AI co-founder, that's important, right? Like
All right. All right. I
so
understand
like
what you mean.
yeah. So one of the things that and it really resonated with me because one of the other like ideas that I learned, and I now I'm not going to remember who did I bring up, but one of the things that I learned is always have a customer in your room. So, for example, in our team podcast, team experiences, team meetings that we have one person who logs in into Zoom, and their name of their Zoom account is relate to customer in search of wow. That's kind of our person. So imagine, in addition to the customer in the room, you have your AI co-founder in the room, right? And I think that just it's a very different way of thinking about AI, like almost leveling up. And I think this is something that we should all be doing with our lives and our careers.
Fascinating. We'll always end with the future, perhaps, when you're thinking about what's next in this very exciting time, technology-wise, and even society perspective, perhaps. I think that is the adaptation of AI. We don't think about it because we use it every single day, but it's still exceptionally low, and therefore, really, its impact of AI from a general perspective is seen to me at least pretty much limitless.
Mm-hmm.
When you're thinking about the future of documents and work in general, actually, about the AI native content that adapts to device, to role, to intent, perhaps, to really, like you said, living collaterals that learn. That's really what the
Yeah,
promise is, I
yeah,
think. And the promised land is an
yeah.
experience that as new operators and a new operating layer, perhaps, to our work and the way we design our life, perhaps. I would really love if you can give us a taste to, in your opinion, obviously, in the next 12 months, what capability would most change how team creates, deliver, and learn from the contents?
Look, so I think there's kind of separate topics. So one is uh, the challenges in adoption. So I think this is underestimated,
Okay.
and I'm particularly conscious because we work with companies in regulated industries. So we sort of know that the one of the biggest challenges, quite simply, is just to get something approved.
Okay.
I still think the biggest bottleneck is at a kind of at a like let's say half to 60% of the economy is just getting it inside the organization, not at a consumer level. Obviously, like we're kind of using that as consumers, but inside the organization. And so, I think the biggest innovation um, needs to be at reducing that friction of adoption to actually have the scale that we're hoping for. Right. So I think that in our business and corporate lives. So that's one point. And I don't think people are innovating enough on like how do we bring AI into the lives of these important but like boring sectors that are struggling to bring that in, right? So like a
Interesting.
little more innovation on the people that are struggling to innovate is a
Mm,
biggest lift because the less sexy, the more boring, the less forgot, like the less kind of vibe coding oriented are the particular individuals, the more likely there's a big opportunity to help them and help that organization, right? And so I see that there's a huge gap. This is something we're addressing was relate to. The second thing is you kind of hinted on it. It's basically the content that reads you and adapts to
yeah.
you, right? Like, so we've always been thinking of the paradigm that, uh, it's this content is the center and you're kind of trying to, adapt to it. And like the new paradigm is, okay, I want to have approved right, correct content, but I have my preferences, right? And I have maybe different preferences at different times of the day, at different areas of interest, different, steps in the buyer journey. And maybe I want this proposal to be read with the voice of Brigitte Bardot or Arnold Schwarzenegger. You got to pump you up. So imagine you could have not just an entertainment, but have a way to adapt to stylistic preferences of the both the sender, right, and the creator, right, and the sender, the creator, and the communicator, and the recipient of the information. And I think
Yes.
that is very different mode of how we used to think about content. And I think the mind shift again is not quite there yet, right? Like, I still think, like, for majority of the creativity is actually right now is happening on the recipient, sort of adapting it a little bit to their need. Um, I uploaded, the document, and I get a podcast version of it, right? But then, what some of our customers are doing is like, well, I could have a podcast, but the podcast standalone is not going to be true document. So imagine I could be listening to the podcast while seamlessly scanning through the experience, and that is interactive and navigatable. And so that is where we see our customers are taking the future. They're saying, hey, I want to have multimodal, out of the box experience, but it shifts. It's not like I now have to listen to a podcast of every PDF because Google has created a great product for that, right? Like, it's sort of, so I think it's bringing them together in a package is a job of the creator. It's not the job of the consumer. And I think that's how one of the ways where I think we'll get a more engagement, because if you're creating uh, a universally relevant consumption experience and you're taking that responsibility, then you're no longer just putting out the message and hoping it sticks, right? You're actually taking the responsibility for having that interaction and having that conversation. So those are kind of couple themes, but I would say the biggest one, uh, and I think this relates back to your interests in Stoic philosophy and beyond, is like the human nature has not changed that dramatically, but our
No.
ability to absorb change uh, is um, is obviously limited, and so the more interesting opportunities, I think, is like, how do we help humans in this age where they are bombarded by digital noise, AI generated at like unprecedented scale, like all, especially in the consumer side, optimized to get our dopamine hits and whatever, wherever else to get to their message. I think we're struggling as a society to make thoughtful decisions, to feel great about the all the time that we're spending kind of in the phones with our digital tools. So I think that is like I don't think that's been solved yet. I think there's a lot of
Interesting.
people doing interesting things, but I think the if you're really taking a holistic approach, um, to digital content and AI content creation and consumption, you should almost take the Hippocratic oath, in my view, of that, and say, first, do no harm, right? And I think it particularly um, in business communications, this goes back to like, how do you create trust and an environment where people have the choice to validate what you're sharing? How do you adapt it to them? Like we were saying, how do you adapt it to their learning needs, learning environments, different divergent learning styles that we have? And then how do you help them feel great at the end of consuming your content, right? Like, how do you help them inspire to move on and tackle something hard, right? Like it's very easy to just fill your feed with TikTok videos that are kind of getting you little dopamine hits. But what if we could take the same energy and string these videos into a narrative that like or was a little mix of text and a little mix of thoughtfulness and some kind of steps that you're doing that actually drives behavioral change that does something good for you. And I think whether it's in health communications, in employee communications, even in getting your investors to really, understand and feel confident about, backing your business, I think there's an opportunity to leave your audience feeling like they've just read something that improved their lives. Just like
Right.
Marcus Aurelius, people keep reading Marcus Aurelius for generations.
Oh, yeah.
This is a book that resonates with people. Now, we obviously can't bring that standard to every business and corporate communications, but if you have that intent, if you have an intent that you have somehow become smarter, you somehow, improve, learn something new, get extra confidence in your decisions, and don't waste time, or kind of use your natural curiosity to progress. I think this is going to be the big challenge for innovators, and I don't see as much focus on that as I would like. Unfortunately, I think this is work to be done for us.
Such a phenomenal answer. Tomorrow's documents won't be read, they will be explore. Alex Shevelenko, what a time to be alive. What an interview. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your insights and being so charismatic. By the way, don't lose that. Don't lose that smirk. Don't lose this little way of yours of explaining things. But I would love if you can leave our audience with some last words of wisdom, please.
So on the same day that Steve Jobs delivered his famous address at Stanford in 2005, which I think you could find on the internet, there was another speech. I was graduating that class from business school, and there was another speech done by our dean, Joss, and he said something that really stuck with me as well. He said, we spent the last 2 years on the premise that by becoming better people, you could become better business people. It's a very simple notion, right? But I think somehow in our society, I think we're saying, hey, I want to be better at this. I want to be a better athlete. I want to be a better better scientist, better business person, better this, better CEO, better marketer, better da 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 da. And I think what we forget fundamentally is that underneath that career, there's a human being, and that human being needs to kind of continue to get better, to connect, especially in the leadership roles. And so, if you become great as a human, you could be great as a leader. On whatever profession you choose. And so that's my mission, is to continue every day, get a little better at that. And I hope your audience doesn't take my ideas, but takes that from 2-year degree at Stanford, which is worth 100K or so.
Thank you for spending your time with us today on the Meaningful Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or share it with someone who could benefit from it. And always remember, your story matters. Make it meaningful. We hope to see you next time.